Nice to meet you, Joanna.
Very nice to meet you too.
Joanna Hogg. Now, have you done three films with Kino Lorber? Is that possible?
The Kino Lorber have taken my three feature films, and they're releasing all three of them, which is a wonderful thing. The first one of the feature films was made back in 2007. It was released in the UK in 2008. So they're taking my back catalogue in a way, but they're releasing them as new films. Well, they're new to the American audience.
Very much so. I discovered, let's see, there was Archipelago, which I just caught up with. That
was the second one.
Yeah, just to catch me up. Okay, let's go through the all three of them.
So there's Unrelated, which was...
That's your first one.
That was my first one, made in 2007. Then Archipelago was made in 2010. And now Exhibition was made in 2013.
Wow. That makes you a prolific filmmaker, I guess, that officially, those three.
I always think I could do more.
Do you?
Well, some filmmakers manage to make a film every year. I don't know how they do it. You think of Woody Allen. I mean, some people are very prolific.
That's a small population. Most are doing, at very best, maybe one every 3 or 4 years.
To give myself credit, I think that's true, and I find I'm living very intensely each film as I'm making it, and I don't think I could increase my productivity anymore. It seems to be naturally that a film of mine comes out every 3 years, because it takes that time in between to conceive of the new film, shoot it, develop it.
Of course.
And bring it out. And I find, in a way, because I'm talking about Exhibition at the moment, I'm not able to fully immerse myself in the next film until I've shed the previous one.
Sure, of course. It makes sense. You were listing all these reasons for why it takes as long as it does to go through the cycle of putting out a film. You missed one very important element, which was Tom Hiddleston's calendar, his schedule.
Because he's getting busier and busier. Exactly.
You discovered him. Let's face it. You put him on the map.
Yep.
Yeah. How did you?
He was already going to go places. But I'm pleased and proud and honoured to have had Tom in his first film for cinema.
Is that right? It was his first?
It was Unrelated was his first. He was only just out of RADA, a very good drama school in London.
Yeah.
And he'd done one piece for television, The Gathering Storm.
Okay.
But Unrelated was the first feature film.
He was pretty young. I mean, I didn't realize quite how young. The something about you British folks, you're so poised that it's hard to realize how young. Just in fact, like Tom was just a few years ago, he was barely out of school age.
Yeah,
you know.
He's been growing up in my films in a way, because he's when you look at him in Unrelated, it was a very particular time for him, and he's different in each of my films. I like to give him challenges for each one, and in Exhibition he plays a very different kind of character, which is kind of further away from his real self. But he's such a good actor; he can inhabit characteristics that aren't his own, but make them feel like he's that guy.
In Exhibition, he has a more minor role, correct?
That's right. I can't give him the lead every time.
Well, talk about your two leads in Exhibition, then. This is about a couple who are married for a long time.
For about 18 years.
I guess that is a long time, certainly by today's standards.
Yes.
And are in a very, very comfortable, you could say, considering themselves in a rut on some level. I don't know if that's self-imposed or if they are, in fact, in a rut. They both seem very alive and busy and creative. So what was going on in your mind when you were writing the story?
Well, I think one of them is a little bit more successful than the other. I see H, the husband, as having had a very successful career as an artist, probably made quite a bit of money as an artist in order to afford the house that they live in. D, his wife, on the other hand, is less confident creatively, hasn't established her career in the same way, and is a little bit in his shadow. And I think the challenge for her through the story is to build confidence and build her own body of work and creativity, and because she's a little bit intimidated by H on a kind of intellectual level, and so that holds her back. I think she's unwilling to talk to him about her work. She thinks if she talks about her ideas with him, that H is somehow going to criticize her. And in fact, I think I see him as very supportive. She just doesn't realize that. So a lot of it is what she's projecting onto him.
Right.
I think a lot of the problems and misunderstandings that happen in relationships are to do with one person projecting onto another.
Yes.
Possibly things that don't exist at all.
Yeah.
So much is in the head. Yes.
Very rarely have I seen, we talk about, the house was a character. But this is a case where that is a very, very legitimate way of describing this home. From the very beginning, in the first shots, I recall her like lying on a window seat or on the floor. And most of the film takes place inside of their house, right?
Yes.
What was it? Was there supposed to be a sense of exile or a sense of isolation, or what were you thinking about?
Well,
It's a beautiful, beautiful house, first of all.
Oh, thank you.
It's yours?
It is a beautiful house. No.
Too bad.
But the house, I wanted to depict the house as another character. So there are 3 characters in the film, and the house is very much one of them. And I think Dee has a relationship with the house that is almost in competition with the relationship she has with her husband. I think she deeply loves the house, and she fears that if she moves from that house, something will change. Maybe something will change in her relationship with H. So a lot of anxiety comes to the surface when the first mention of the house being sold comes up. So this house, that's another character, also has different moods. So I was interested in the house sometimes being a fearful place to be. Again, it's possibly in Dee's head, it's her projections, but the house becomes quite frightening at a certain point, particularly after the house has been put up for sale.
Right,
so it's like the house reacts in some way. I mean, I get this in places that I've lived in, that I'll walk in the front door and something has changed. There's an atmosphere almost like a ghostliness, or a different color in a color, some sort of different aura that space gives off. But again, I'm always interested in how much of ourselves we're kind of putting onto these places that we spend so much of our time in.
A reference that I get is almost like a Waiting for Godot, where they try every time they leave, they're pulled back into the house. There's a scene where I think he goes off.
Actually, during the shoot, I was very reluctant to go and shoot any scenes that happened outside the house. I sort of developed an attachment to the place myself.
Interesting.
And at one point thought maybe I should cut all the scenes that I'd written that aren't inside the house, make it a complete chamber piece in a sense. And it was thanks to my wonderful collaborators, like my production designer, Stéphane Collange, and my cinematographer, Ed Rutherford. They'd obviously read my document for the story, for the film, and liked the sequences that I'd developed outside the house, particularly the sort of more dreamlike sequences. And so when I said, maybe I'm going to cut all those scenes, we're just going to stay in the house, they reacted very strongly and said, well, that's a real shame, they're wonderful scenes. So I don't know what it was. I got some kind of agoraphobia during the shoot, and I'm very glad that I pushed my way through that. I think what happens is I create this atmosphere that feels very real. So it's not just the characters who are in the story. Everyone who's making the film is somehow in the story. And because we're spending so much time, it's like any film shoot, really. You're spending an intense period of time together. But I think because of the way I work, and I shoot in story order, it becomes very real for everybody, including myself.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So we're all living and breathing it.
Yeah. You do shoot in chronological order as well.
Yes.
Wow.
That gives me a lot of freedom. That's really important to me to do that.
I imagine it would, right. And also, thinking through the 3 films, though, and I do want to talk a little bit about this as well, is that they're all usually anchored in at one house.
Yes.
They do share that in common. And also, I noticed you don't use a score in any 3 films, or do you?
No.
Right?
I treat my sound design almost like a score. I've become really interested in the sound design, becoming almost musical in many ways. And I love music. It may seem that I don't like music, but I love it. I see everyday sounds as very musical. I mean, I'm in New York today and listening to the sirens and the street sounds, and it's like music on some level.
Oh, sure. It's the score of this podcast. It's a New York-based thing, so why pretend that we're in some sort of, bubble.
And those sirens
Really
have a
sensitive.
particular character. I find them quite disturbing. The sirens here. I don't know if it's the ambulances or it's the fire
All of them.
engines, but they have a kind of developing scream.
Well, they have to, because there are people in their cars that are playing their music really loud.
Yeah. So
there's
it
competing.
penetrates all those other sounds. But
Or even outside, there's just so much competition of
Yes.
decibels.
Yes. Yeah, so they've obviously developed that particular tone. It's very different in London. I mean, we also have sirens that have to cut through, all the other
Jackhammers.
sounds. But it's different. I mean, I'm interested in the different characters cities have.
New York City's grittier than London, though. I mean, that's a generalization, but it's a little bit bigger. It's more on a higher octane level, I think.
I
there's
like
still
it a lot.
Do you? The energy, though, it can't be matched. That's true. Talking about the most common theme is that of Joanna Hogg's family dynamics in each family. They're very, very, on the surface, very typical British, well off, comfortable financially. And they all kind of self-impose, again, this idea, we're going on a family vacation, we're ignoring the tension until we can't. And there's always this eruption that occurs on some level. Well, at least certainly in your first two films.
In Unrelated and Archipelago, it's very much about that rupture.
Yeah. And
possibly less so in Exhibition because the family's also much smaller.
Right. Just the couple. And are they childless?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But what about the family dynamic?
It's something I'm fascinated in, and it
Yeah.
may or may not relate to my own family. Of course, it does in many ways, or certainly my experience of family life. I'm not. My work isn't autobiographical, but I am definitely observing situations or experiences that I've had in my life. It's not just about my own family. I'm always observing group dynamics of one kind or another. So not just family, not just blood relations, but just when I see a group together, how groups behave. I'm really fascinated in the different laws that govern groups and how things change within a group, how things can suddenly become very violent. But yes, on a more subtle level, I think I've always observed from a distance. I think growing up in my family, I think I was always the one, or I certainly felt like the one who was slightly apart. But I was very quiet, but I always had my eyes open.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think these observations have then turned into my filmmaking in a way. I'm often much more comfortable observing than participating.
Being a filmmaker would be a very perfect role. You can sort of sit back behind the camera.
Yes, it's much safer behind the camera.
Yeah.
But I continue to be interested in these group dynamics, these family dynamics. So I could make endless films about this.
Right.
And I would get accused of repeating myself, but I always see new things. And I think as artists, there's one's got a sort of plate of ingredients that are inspiring to me. And you just keep sort of making a new recipe each time, but in a way the sort of ingredients remain the same. Somehow, as human beings, we're inspired by certain dynamics,
right? Of course,
certain ideas.
Right, and there's chaos that is brought up by whatever dynamics you were brought up with, and getting them out is an endless process of working them through, getting them out in the world. And art, thank God for it, because it's your salvation too. Also, it works on a global scale or a more political level, too, where you'll find the greatest art coming out of a country that's in political turmoil or what have it. Similar inner turmoil also puts out...
Is also your sort of own personal war zone, in a sense. Yeah.
I was interested in... There was about Bergman, who, of course, I'm sure that name has come up in conversations with your filmmaking, too, how he was, when he was married to Liv Ullmann, and how he kept her exiled on his island... in Scandinavia, he had an island, and he hadn't worked out. I mean, you'd think after all the theater and all the films that he made, but he was still kind of working things out and destructive on an interpersonal level.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I find that discouraging in some ways. Because I would hope, in a way, I would hope through kind of making films and creating a body of work that one is also learning something about life.
Right.
I feel I embark on a project and it's an exploration into something that I want to have a better handle on. I mean, with Exhibition, actually, as case in point, I felt I embarked on that because I was becoming increasingly anxious in London. I felt that the sort of city environment was adding to that anxiety, and I at a certain point actually thought consciously to myself, I want to make this film, and I want to open up this anxiety to see what it's really about, to understand it, to explore it, go really into it, and that was, yes, that's what I sort of one of the things that I wanted to do with the film. And I mean, but it's true to say actually, and it links with what you just said about Bergman. I'm not sure if my anxieties are any better having made the film, but
exploring.
But I'll still carry on. I'll still carry on making films, hoping that I'll learn something.
Well, exploring, and then the next level, I guess, is a more active level where you're making changes if in fact that's what you discover you need or want to do. You know. But the obsessions of your stories, to get back to that, I wonder if you have another script ready to go, or if you're working on something, and if there's ever an active decision to try to get away from what you've been doing, or and then you end up usually going back to it at some level anyway.
I think that's right. I mean, what usually happens actually is that I find it very difficult to say goodbye to a film that I've just made. I'm still attached to the themes and the ideas around it, so I don't want to let go of it. So there'll always be something I carry through onto the next film from the previous one, rather than reacting to the previous one and going in a very different direction. However, I'm still always pushing myself in new directions, even if it's with this same theme that I'm dealing with. I mean, the next one, actually, I'm going back in time, so I'm touching a little bit on autobiography for the first time, and I'm making a film set in the early 1980s. So that's the first time I'll have ever gone back in time.
It's a period piece from.
But I just wanted to say, because I didn't want to end on that note earlier, where I was talking about making a film to sort of try and deal with some personal issue that I have myself. I mean, obviously, I may end up not making that breakthrough I want to make personally, but at the same time one hopes to communicate to an audience, and the someone in the audience will have, I mean, it sounds a bit grand, but will be enlightened in some way by something of that piece of work that you've made. So it may have an effect, hopefully, on other people. But to say it's all about kind of making changes for myself, that's not entirely true. I'm wanting to communicate my ideas and hope to touch people through doing that.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think it's a given. It's a relationship with an audience, that what you have created. I think that's part of what it is to make a film, is to create something that an audience will be able to respond to.
Well, I hope so. That's definitely
Well, they seem to be interested. You're doing right now. You're here. They're doing a bit of a retrospective of those three films. Kino
Lorber are distributing all three films. So they're on Friday, 20th of June, they're releasing Exhibition. So at the Lincoln Center, they're running Exhibition for 2 weeks. But in the second week, Exhibition is joined by the previous two films, Unrelated and Archipelago. So they're showing all three films. I don't think they're seeing it as a retrospective. It's actually
their first
run. Exactly.
Oh, brilliant! Oh, that's wonderful. Wow, that's very exciting for you. That's kind of tricky, though. So you're here for the opening night of Exhibition, and then are you going to hang out in New York for a week? Well, and then kind of hang out for the other two films?
I really wish I was, because I love New York so much. So, no, unfortunately, I'm only here till Sunday, so I won't get to see the release of the other two. But, I mean, they can always twist my arm and try and persuade me to stay. It wouldn't take much to persuade me. But I think they've thought, well, we'll have her over for the first few days and do interviews and, introduce Exhibition on Friday and Saturday and do Q&As and,
Well, I hope a lot of people go out and see the films. They're magnificent. They're beautiful. They look great, and very compelling characters. And it's intense. But thank God for making stories that make you feel and think and grapple with things. It's important, Well, it's really nice meeting you, Joanna. Thank you for squeezing this in.
No, well, not at all. No, it's a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.